My name is Daniel Carter, and this is the story of how my life changed in ways I never imagined. I grew up in a large brick house on Rosewood Street in Chicago, America. The house had tall windows, a wide front porch, and a small garden where my mother spent most of her mornings taking care of flowers. My father, Edward Carter, was a hardworking man who built his life from almost nothing. He owned a small metal parts factory on the edge of the city. The factory produced machine parts that were sold to companies across America and sometimes even to businesses in Europe. It was not a huge company, but it was valuable to our family and worth close to $900,000. My father always said that the factory was the result of 30 years of effort and sacrifice. My mother, Margaret Carter, was the calm center of our family. She believed that patience and kindness could solve almost every problem. Whenever my father and I argued about work, she was the one who made sure things settled down. Then there was my younger sister, Emily Carter. She was smart and confident, but she also had a personality that made people careful around her. Emily liked control and attention, and she always wanted to be involved in important family matters. After finishing my studies, I started working at my father's factory full-time. I wanted to prove that I deserved the trust he had in me. I spent long hours at the factory, sometimes arriving before the workers and leaving long after the machines had stopped. Over time, my father began giving me more responsibility. I handled client meetings, managed production schedules, and sometimes traveled to other cities in America for business. Slowly, the workers began to see me as the person who might one day run the company. During one of my work trips, my life took an unexpected turn. I traveled to Paris in Europe to meet a small design company that wanted to buy parts from our factory. That was where I met Sophie Laurent. She worked at a small office near the river and helped manage design projects. Sophie was kind, simple, and easy to talk to. What began as a short conversation during a business meeting slowly turned into something more. Over the next few months we stayed in contact, talking late into the night across different time zones. Eventually, our relationship grew serious, and we decided to do something that would change everything. Without telling my family, Sophie and I quietly married in a small church in Paris. At the time, it felt like the happiest decision of my life. I believed that I could manage both my marriage and my family business without any problems. But I didn't realize that secrets, especially in families like mine, rarely stay hidden for long. And the moment my father discovered the truth would become the beginning of the biggest conflict of my life. For a few weeks after my secret wedding with Sophie Laurent in Paris, life felt normal again. I returned to Chicago, America, and went back to work at my father's factory as if nothing had changed. Every morning I drove from our family house on Rosewood Street to the factory building on the edge of the city. The machines were loud as always, the workers greeted me the same way, and my father continued discussing production numbers and contracts with me as if the future of the company was still being prepared for my hands. But deep inside me, there was always a small feeling of worry. I knew I had hidden something very important from my family. My father believed strongly in tradition and family reputation. He expected that when I married, it would be someone he approved of, someone who might help strengthen the company's connections. Sophie was not from America. She lived in Europe, worked in a creative field, and had no connection to our business world. I kept telling myself that I would explain everything to my family soon, but each time I thought about it, I delayed the conversation. Meanwhile, my sister Emily watched everything quietly. Emily had started spending more time at the factory during that period. She said she wanted to learn how the company worked, but something about her behavior felt different. She asked many questions about the company's finances, the ownership papers, and the legal structure of the business. At the time I believed she was simply curious about the family business. I had no idea that she was carefully studying every detail. The truth finally came out in a way I never expected. One evening I was sitting in my small apartment in Chicago talking with Sophie on the phone. She was still in Paris at the time. We were planning when she might move to America so we could start our life together properly. While we were talking, my phone suddenly began receiving message after message. Notifications from coworkers, old friends, and even distant relatives appeared on my screen. At first I didn't understand what was happening. Then one of my coworkers sent me a short message. "Daniel, you should check your father's Facebook page." When I opened the page, my heart felt like it stopped for a moment. There was a photo of Sophie and me standing outside the small church in Paris on our wedding day. My father had written a short message under the picture. "Sometimes the greatest betrayal comes from your own family." My hands started shaking. Someone had sent my father the wedding photos. The next morning I woke up early and drove straight to the factory. I believed that if I explained everything face to face, my father might calm down. But when I reached the main gate of the factory, something strange happened. The security guard stepped in front of me and gently raised his hand. "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter," he said carefully. "I was told you are not allowed inside anymore." For a moment I thought it was some kind of misunderstanding. I tried to use my access card at the gate, but it didn't work. The system showed that my authorization had been removed. I called my father several times, but he did not answer. When I tried to log into the factory's management system from my phone, my account no longer existed. My company email was disabled. Even my office key card had been deactivated. Within a single night, my connection to the company had completely disappeared. Later that afternoon, I finally received a message from my father. It was short and cold. "You chose your life. Now live it without the factory." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to understand how everything had collapsed so quickly. I had worked at that factory for nearly 10 years. I helped build many of its contracts and relationships. Yet suddenly my name had been removed from everything as if I had never been part of it. For the next few days, I tried contacting different people inside the company, but most of them avoided speaking with me. Some told me quietly that they had been instructed not to discuss company matters with me anymore. About a week later, an older accountant from the factory named Michael Harris asked if we could meet privately. We met in a small coffee shop near the downtown area of Chicago. He looked nervous while sitting across the table from me. Finally, he leaned closer and spoke quietly. "Daniel, I don't think you know the whole story." I asked him what he meant. He sighed and shook his head slowly. "This wasn't only your father's decision. Your sister Emily brought those photos to him." According to Michael, Emily had shown my father the wedding pictures and told him that I had been hiding my marriage because I was planning to move to Europe permanently. She convinced him that I might try to take company money or leave the business at an important time. My father became angry and believed that I had betrayed the family's trust. Then Emily offered a solution. She suggested that my father transfer more control of the company to her so she could protect the family business. By the time my father realized how quickly he had acted, the legal papers had already been signed. Emily now had major control of the factory. When I walked out of that coffee shop, I realized something painful. I had not only lost my job, I had lost my place in my own family. After everything that happened with my family and the factory, Sophie and I decided that the best thing we could do was start a completely new life. The pain of losing my place in the company and being cut off from my own family was still fresh, but staying in Chicago would only make those memories worse. Within a few months, I packed my things, left the house on Rosewood Street behind, and moved to London in Europe to be with Sophie. Life there was very different from the life I had known in America. Back in Chicago, I had been part of a business worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, working with machines, contracts, and large orders. In London, I had to begin from the very bottom again. My first job was managing equipment for a small workshop that repaired industrial tools. The pay was not impressive. I earned about £2,400 a month, which was enough to cover rent, food, and simple living. At first it felt strange to go from helping run a factory worth $900,000 to working in a small repair shop, but slowly I learned to accept the change. Sophie helped me more than anyone could imagine. She never complained about the smaller apartment we lived in or the simpler lifestyle we now had. Instead, she reminded me that peace and honesty were worth more than money. Over time, the anger I had carried toward my father and sister slowly faded into something quieter. I stopped checking social media accounts connected to my family. I stopped asking old coworkers about the factory. I told myself that part of my life was finished. 2 years later, Sophie and I moved again, this time to Manchester in Europe. It was a quieter city, and we found a small townhouse that we loved immediately. After saving money for some time, we bought the house for £180,000. It was not a mansion like the house I grew up in, but it had something that my old home never truly had: peace. The street was calm, our neighbors were friendly, and for the first time in many years I felt like my life had become stable again. 7 years passed like that. 7 years without speaking to my father. 7 years without hearing anything about my sister Emily. Then one evening, something unexpected happened. I was sitting in the living room of our townhouse after dinner, scrolling through my phone while Sophie read a book beside me. Suddenly, a message notification appeared from an account I did not recognize. Normally I ignored unknown messages, but something about this one made me curious. The message was short. "Daniel, someone from your family is trying to contact you. Please respond." At first I thought it might be some kind of scam or mistake. I ignored it and placed my phone on the table. But the next day another message appeared from the same account. Then another one 2 days later. Finally, curiosity got the better of me, and I opened the message request again. This time the sender explained that he worked as a legal assistant connected to my father's old factory. According to him, my father had been trying to find a way to contact me for months but could not reach me through any of the old numbers or email addresses. The assistant asked if I would be willing to hear an important message about my family. The request made me uneasy. For 7 years I had lived without them. Part of me wanted to keep it that way, but another part of me wondered what could have changed after such a long time. A few days later, another message arrived, but this time it came from someone I recognized. My cousin Lucas Carter from New York in America. Lucas and I had been close when we were younger, and he had always been more honest than the rest of the family. When I saw his name, I finally decided to respond. His reply came almost immediately. Daniel, you deserve to know the truth about what happened after you left. Over the next hour, Lucas explained everything. After my departure from the factory, Emily had taken control of most of the company operations. At first things appeared normal. My father still technically owned the business, but Emily was the one making daily decisions. She presented herself as the person who had saved the company from my so-called betrayal. But slowly, her behavior began to change. Emily started spending more and more time in private clubs and high-end casinos. At first she claimed it was only for networking with wealthy clients. But soon large amounts of money began disappearing from the company's financial records. Lucas told me that Emily lost $40,000 during her first year of gambling. Then she lost another $120,000. By the third year, her losses had grown to nearly $500,000. To hide the losses, she began using company funds and selling parts of the factory's equipment. Contracts were neglected, deliveries were delayed, and clients slowly began leaving. Within a few years, the business my father had spent decades building was drowning in debt. But the worst event happened in Boston in America. One night, after drinking heavily in a private bar, Emily got into an argument with another woman. In her drunken anger, she attacked the woman without realizing who she was. The woman turned out to be the wife of a police officer. The incident quickly became a public scandal. Emily was arrested, and the news spread across local media. The Carter family name, once respected in business circles, became connected to bankruptcy and criminal behavior. When Lucas finished telling me the story, there was a long silence between us. Then he sent one final message. Daniel, after everything that happened, your father finally knows the truth. And now he wants to speak with you. After my cousin Lucas told me everything about what had happened to my family, I sat quietly in the living room for a long time. Sophie noticed the change in my face and gently closed her book. She asked me what was wrong, and I slowly explained the entire story to her. I told her about Emily losing hundreds of thousands of dollars through gambling, about the factory collapsing under debt, and about the scandal in Boston where she had attacked a police officer's wife while drunk. Saying those things out loud felt strange. For years I had tried to forget about my family, but now their problems had suddenly returned to my life. Sophie listened patiently. She didn't interrupt or judge anyone. When I finished speaking, she simply said, "What do you want to do now?" It was a simple question, but I didn't have an easy answer. Part of me still remembered the day I was stopped at the factory gate in Chicago, the day my father removed my name from everything without even giving me a chance to explain. That memory had stayed with me for 7 long years. Another part of me, however, remembered the earlier years when my father and I worked side by side building that factory. I remembered the long mornings, the smell of metal and oil from the machines, and the pride my father felt when we signed a new contract worth $20,000 or $30,000. Those memories made the decision much more complicated. A few days later I received another message from Lucas. This time it contained a phone number and a short sentence. "Dad wants to talk whenever you are ready." Seeing that message made my heart feel heavy. For years there had been nothing but silence between my father and me. Now suddenly he wanted to speak again. I waited 2 more days before finally deciding to make the call. When the phone rang, I almost hung up before anyone answered. But then I heard a voice on the other side. "Daniel." It was my father, Edward Carter. His voice sounded older and weaker than I remembered. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence felt long and uncomfortable. Finally he took a slow breath and said something I never expected to hear. "I made a terrible mistake." Those 4 words changed the entire conversation. My father explained that after I left, he trusted Emily completely. She told him that she was protecting the company from the damage I had supposedly caused. He believed her stories for years. Whenever the factory began losing money, she blamed market problems or dishonest employees. My father was getting older and slowly stepped back from daily management, allowing Emily to handle more responsibilities. It was not until the debts started becoming impossible to hide that he realized something was very wrong. By then the factory had already lost major contracts and owed nearly $300,000 to different suppliers. Equipment had been sold, employees had been laid off, and the reputation of the business had been destroyed. The final blow came after the incident in Boston. When Emily was arrested, reporters began investigating her financial records and discovered how much money she had taken from the company. My father told me that the factory building had eventually been sold to pay off part of the debts. After everything was settled, he was left with very little money compared to what he once had. The business that had once been worth close to $900,000 was completely gone. Then he said something that surprised me even more. "I want to start again," he said quietly. "Not a big factory like before. Just a small workshop." He explained that he still had around $60,000 saved. It was not enough to rebuild a large company, but it could be used to rent a small workspace and buy a few machines. He asked if I would consider coming back to America and helping him start over. After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table thinking about everything he had said. The past could not be changed, but the future was still open. That night Sophie and I talked for a long time. She reminded me that rebuilding something honest might be better than carrying anger forever. A month later I traveled to New York in America to meet my father. When I saw him at the airport, he looked much older than the man I remembered from Chicago. His hair was almost completely white, and his shoulders seemed slightly bent. But when we shook hands, I felt something familiar again. Within a few weeks we rented a small warehouse on the edge of the city. It was nothing like the large factory we once had. The space was simple, with only a few machines and a small office desk. But for the first time in many years, my father and I were working together again. Our first contract was small, only worth $8,000, but when we completed the order successfully, my father smiled the same proud smile I remembered from my childhood. As for Emily, she lost everything she had tried to control. The company, the inheritance, and the respect of the people around her were all gone. Her choices had destroyed the life she tried to build through deception. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have turned out if the truth had been known earlier. But life does not move backward. It only moves forward. And now, after everything that happened, my father and I are building something new again, slowly, honestly, and one step at a time.